Sure.
What's that in the sky? It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Talk Geekly.
Welcome back to Talk Geekly, friends. Of course, I am Pendragon, and I am with the Gotham Knight, Job for a Cody.
We are Talk Geekly, bringing you the latest and the greatest from comic books, video games, and so much more from the geek culture.
Yeah, and it's really nice to be back the following week. That's right, because we are working on making this a weekly podcast for you guys, and I think we got it down pat. What do you say?
Yeah, I would say we're on a nice little schedule, staying really consistent with it, and if anything, it's opening us up to more within the comic book realm itself, because when we were doing it bi-weekly, I would, naturally just drift towards the comics I was most interested in. But since we're doing it weekly, not all of, the books that I'm currently reading comes out on a weekly schedule. So like for this week, for instance, we had Batman issue 71, which is a current run that I'm interested in, but I had to read three new books, and that really opened me up to a lot of good material that I normally probably wouldn't have dove into. So
I got you. And that's awesome. I mean, I think it's not only for the audience out there, opening them up to new books. Like you said, doing this weekly is now allowing us to experience some fresh books as well. So, I mean, let's jump right into those new books. I mean, what do you got for us?
Mentioning Batman 71, we'll just start right off with that. In Batman issue 70, I left the viewers and the listeners off on a special footnote. We're introduced to Thomas Wayne. That's right, that's Batman's father, who's teamed up with Bane. So in this issue, we come head to head with Bruce meeting up with Bane, Thomas Wayne, and it looks like Alfred is serving Bane and Thomas Wayne. So it was intriguing to see that happen. And of course, Bruce calls in the Bat family to take down Bane and this army. But we're left with a big mystery, because this could all be within Batman's head.
Yeah,
now,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, Batman 71 was written by Tom King, and the artist is Michael Janin. Okay. So I just wanted to include that real quick.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that you think it might be all in Bruce's head, because, I mean, the only Thomas Wayne that I know would be the Flashpoint Thomas Wayne. So somehow this guy has entered the standard DC universe?
Yeah, and it's what's even more intriguing is the fact that Thomas Wayne is wearing the Flashpoint suit too. What do you have for us on the side of Marvel?
Well, starting off this week, I remember last week, first off, we talked about Thanos issue 1, and it had me talking a bit about what was going on within Guardians of the Galaxy and the reboot that they basically were doing over at Marvel. So I went ahead and jumped back into that with Guardians of the Galaxy number 5. Of course, Hela is still looking to resurrect Thanos, and now the Dark Guardians have Gamora. So things are really basically coming to a head within the Guardians of the Galaxy story arc. You have the good Guardians. So there's Lockjaw is now helping Star-Lord and Groot, and Beta Ray Bill, who is a member of the Guardians of the Galaxy now, basically trying to help them get to Gamora before she is murdered, or at least that's what they think is going to happen. They do believe that Thanos' brother Eros is going to kill the Mad Titan's daughter. But this is where things get a little bit weird, because we do have a character by the name of Wraith, who helped the Dark Guardians retrieve Gamora, and for helping, Eros provided Wraith with information on the being Null. Now, I, for one, got really excited about that, because I feel like this is going to have to tie in to the upcoming Summer of Carnage story arc, which, for those of you who do not know, Null is the father, the progenitor. He is the original he is the creator of all of the symbiotes. So Guardians of the Galaxy is getting really, really interesting, and written by Donny Cates. It's got art from Geoff Shaw, which Donny Cates, he is a god right now in Marvel. He helped create the Cosmic Ghost Rider. I don't think Donny Cates can do anything wrong.
So real quick, with Hela being the main point of focus here, do you think she's going to become a love interest for Thanos if he does become resurrected?
It's interesting you said that, and with these reviews, we always say we're keeping them super short and sweet and not getting too spoilery. But everyone knows that Thanos is all about Mistress Death and being in love with that being, and Hela is more or less the Asgardian version of that. So. Yeah, Cody, you hit the nail on the head. There's definitely a love interest thing going on there.
Well, taking it back to the DC side of things, this is where we start diving into some of the books that I previously haven't read. So keeping in mind, we're jumping into runs that are like right in the middle of things. And I really didn't have a whole lot of time to do a lot of back reading to kind of catch myself up to date. So we're just going to swing for it. We're going with Teen Titans issue number 30, the Terminus Agenda. We start off with the Teen Titans killing Deathstroke. Yeah, it was really, really insane. Red Arrow, I think is her name, shot Deathstroke right in the face, killed him. We see Robin with an eye patch, so it's almost like he's taking on the persona of Deathstroke in this issue. And we're introduced to a couple new members as well, such as Crush, which is, believe it or not, Lobo's daughter. And some other new members too, such as I think the name's Jin, who kind of gave me like the telekinesis type of vibe. And I want to say Roundhouse was a new character too, which I'm pretty unsure of his powers. It looks like he's kind of like the brute of the team. And I want to say we were also introduced to Kid Flash. I think it's Kid Flash. So it was really good read. This was one of the ones that I wasn't necessarily going to ever dive into, but since I needed some material for this week, I chose this one and I was really happy with it. We see the team starting to go head to head because they don't kill. That's one of the principles of the Teen Titans is they never kill, and Red Arrow killed Deathstroke. So you got the team divided on what to do and what not to do, and then we're met with a very, very nefarious foe. I'm not going to drop it, but I think the Teen Titans have a little more on their plate than they expected. Now, this was written by Adam Glass, and the artist was Bernard Chang.
That's interesting. Hearing that they killed Deathstroke, it kind of just has me sitting here like, man, so how are they going to explain that it actually wasn't Deathstroke? Because I find it really hard to believe that DC is just going to have a character such as Deathstroke meet his demise at the hands of the Teen Titans.
No, absolutely. And first and foremost, I do want to apologize if I'm mispronouncing any names or misrepresenting any of the members on the team. This was my first time reading any of the current Teen Titans, so please keep that in mind before you guys come at me with pitchforks.
Hey man, we all make mistakes, especially with comic books. There's just so many different pronunciations and crazy words that people just made up out of nowhere. But I'll go ahead with my next book, which it's no surprise, guys. I'm going to be talking about Uncanny X-Men again. And for the longest while there, I thought that they were only doing these every week for issues 1 through 10, because that was Marvel's original. That was Marvel's original plan. However, apparently the books were gaining so much momentum and so much popularity that Marvel actually is continuing to release Uncanny X-Men every single week. So I have 2 more Uncanny X-Men books that I had to catch up on. And I mean, issue 17, it's all about how you deal with grief and mourning. And last episode, we talked about a member dying. Well, in this issue, we're going to have to deal with that member dying. And of course, we're actually ultimately going to see Scott and Logan go down two completely different paths. No surprise there. I mean, Scott and Logan, they never get along. And I mean, this actually is going to end up altering their mission in the long run, because it's just going to play on that tense relationship that they always have. And this issue, it's a very somber issue, but what you take away from this issue really does help to set things up following up in issue 18, where the bodies just continue to pile up and the Uncanny X-Men is not slowing down. I mean, we have a bloody battle in the subway. The team returns home only to find out that their hideout was destroyed by none other than the mutant mastermind, Mr. Sinister. And
Ooh, so we...
Go ahead, please,
sorry.
because Sinister is just
Yeah, we had an appearance of Sinister. How did that end up going?
Yeah, well, first off, he looks amazing, as he always does. He has one of the coolest looks I've always thought from all the mutant villains. But during the showdown, what's really, really cool is Alex Summers actually ends up unleashing a new power that he has never displayed before, which helps them to ultimately subdue Mr. Sinister. But, you know, all that excitement is short-lived for the reader. I mean, because as the person who was mentioned in issue 17, they are finally revealed, and it's none other than the White Queen, Emma Frost. Ooh. And the kicker is, no one other than the people around her even knows who she is or where she came from. That's right, the X-Men have never heard of Emma Frost. Scott Summers has never heard of Emma Frost. So it's getting really, really crazy. It's written by Matthew Rosenberg. It's got art from Carlos Villa. Uncanny X-Men still rolling. Hot, hot, hot.
Well, another hot issue right off the press, Justice League 24. Now, this is the 6th Dimension chapter. Chapter 5, excuse me. The League's plan is in full swing, but there's not a crucial member on the team. We come to find out that Batman may be the villain of this issue. And it looks like he's siding with the World Forger. With Superman stuck in the 5th dimension, trying to escape it, is the Justice League going to be doomed to live in the 6th dimension? There's a lot of dimensions, and this was one of the new issues where I dropped into, and I dropped right in the middle of it, and I was like, man, so many dimensions, not enough time. But it looks like Batman is going to don what's called, I want to say, the final bat suit, and things are not looking good for the Justice League in this issue. The cover art itself shows an evil Batman just laughing and clutching the members of the Justice League in his hands. And it says right there, destroyed by the Dark Knight. So, you know, not spoiling too much there, but I think issue 25 is gonna definitely bring the heat. This was written by Scott Snyder, with art being done by George Jimenez? I think is how you pronounce his last name? Jimenez. And yeah, dude, spectacular artwork in this, and just beautifully written by Snyder as always.
See, I'm always a fan of stories that have basically Batman doing some non-Batman like things, or even just doing Batman things when he's basically one-upping the other members of the Justice League. You know, showing them that he has the prowess to take them down.
A lot of people don't really consider him, you know, to be a true superhero. But I would almost argue that, and that'd be another good podcast where, you know, on the side. But I would almost argue with his mindset and his tactical abilities, that's a superhero ability within itself, because that's really what's capitalized within this issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so going back to Marvel here, about a month or so back, I was reading a story that was just coming out called Spider-Man Life Story. And because of a few setbacks that we had, and, you know, we weren't really focusing too much on the show, more or less focusing on ourselves, getting ourselves into the right spot, I kind of forgot all about the book. But now that we are back and we are hitting it hard, I jumped back into it with Spider-Man Life Story 3. Now, what's really nice about this arc, this series, is they're taking a rather different approach to comic books and to the way stories are told, in the fact that these books are all taking place throughout the different decades that the character has existed. So when you think about it, Spider-Man came out back in the 60s, and till today, the character basically has not aged, right? I mean, that's all of comics, you know. When you think about Superman came out in 38, and for some reason Lois Lane is still looking like she's in her mid 30s. So with this Spider-Man Life Story, what they've done is the series issue 1 takes place in the 60s, and it, you know, goes through that whole thing. But with Spider-Man Life Story number 3, we are set in the 80s. So basically, Spider-Man has been doing his thing for about 30 years now, and it just continues the idea that the first, you know, issue established. We're following him through the decades and watching him grow as a person as well as a superhero. And we actually get a rather inventive and really fresh look into the famous black suit Spidey, which eventually, we all know, becomes Venom once Eddie Brock gets his hands on it. But Spider-Man Life Story kind of changes things up a little bit. You know, being as how they're going from decade to decade, they're not doing the exact same thing that has been established in the original Spider-Man mythos or canon, however you want to say. So we get to see Kraven the Hunter getting a hold of the symbiote, getting a hold of the black suit.
And Kraven has always been a worthy opponent of Spider-Man, so I'm really excited to see, you know, pretty much what, a Venom take on Kraven the Hunter. That would be insane.
Yeah, and it's really cool because what happens in this book is it's similar to the Eddie Brock origin, where he was just down on his luck and ready to end his life. And that's what, you know, Kraven basically took his hunting rifle and was about to put a bullet into the back of his brain when all of a sudden the symbiote latched on to the gun, pulled it away, and just took over him. So this is written by Chip Zdarsky, and it's got art from Mark Bagley. I mean, this is a really, really nice read, and since they're doing it decade after decade, you can go back. There's only 3 issues. You can read them and get caught up really quick, and I feel like it is a satisfying read.
Another satisfying read, surprisingly, I think you're going to like this the most, Pen, is I chose a Superman issue for my last issue today. Superman issue number 11. So this is a very interesting issue. Once again, another issue that I started in the middle of. So basically, we see General Zod, and I'm trying to think of how to pronounce his name. How do you have any idea?
Rogol Zar.
Rogol Zar? Yeah, Rogol
Zar.
Zar. So General Zod wakes up in the Phantom Zone with Rogol Zar, and Zar's pretty much like, if you want to fight me, you better eat something, and you're gonna need a yellow sun because I've been sitting here, I'm well rested, I'm well fed, and I'm ready for more. Next thing you know, they team up. They're like, well, let's go and take down Jor-El, which, you know, as everybody knows, is Superman's father. We see Superman and his son in the midst of an intergalactic war. It looks like 3 different armies are converging on Jor-El, and Superman does not know what's going on. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of misleading evidence that might show Jor-El is the culprit of this, or maybe something else is happening behind the scenes. Without spoiling too much, we see the House of L combating Zar and Zod, and it's leading up to a very, very intense issue number 2, with the special appearance of 2 new members of the House of L at the end.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If you don't mind, I'd like to interject for just a moment here.
No, go ahead. I was just about to say, I know you're a Superman fan, and I know you read this, so I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because being a Superman fan and trying to do this podcast, I disappointed myself. I dropped the ball and haven't read a book since Action Comics 1000. So after seeing that you were really digging what they were doing with this book, I had to pick it up, see what was going on with Ragal Zar. And man, it's crazy where they're going with this, because you have Superboy, John Kent. He basically was trapped in an alternate dimension, and what for him only seemed like 3 weeks, or sorry, what for everyone else only seemed like 3 weeks was actually a couple years. So now you have Superman trying to be a father to a son who basically grew up without him. Superboy is ridiculously taller. He's like at least 5-6 years older than what he was the last time Lois and Clark actually interacted with him. And you find out that the reason all of this happened with Superboy is because of some dealings that Jor-El did. And that's what's leading us to this Death of the House of El story arc, because everything is coming back to blow up in Jor-El's face. But we know that he did all of this to save his grandson, who was lost in another dimension. Kind of like you were just talking about dimensions here, dimensions there, dimensions everywhere. So yeah, it's really interesting to see where they take this and to see what Zar ends up doing in the long run.
No, yeah, I'm extremely intrigued, and this is also another issue I normally wouldn't have read, but now I'm left here definitely wanting more and wanting to see how everything happens and plays out.
Yeah, so I think we got some good books this week that you guys definitely want to check out. Like Cody, he hit you with the Batman issue 71, Teen Titans 30, Justice League 24, and then Superman 11. Don't forget those DC books, guys. And then our Marvel books, we had Uncanny X-Men 17 and 18, Guardians of the Galaxy number 5, and then the Spider-Man Life Story series. So with that said, let's jump in and find out what's going on as far as your geekly news is concerned.
So, right off, swinging right from the bat, we're going to be leading off with a really, really big announcement. Microsoft and Sony are establishing a partnership. And that's right, the two gigantic foes against each other in the war of consoles are planning on sharing technology information going forward and building an infrastructure that might lead to, cross-platform compatibility, cloud sharing, and much more.
Yeah, this is seriously interesting.
Yeah, this is a big thing. And I think it's because, with the way PC is leading the way and making moves and leaps and bounds in the future, I think consoles are starting to become more and more obsolete the longer we progress into the future. Penn, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, it's really, really amazing to see that Sony is taking this step. A few months ago, we had the announcement of Google Stadia, and then we also were followed up with the announcement of Microsoft's xCloud. So cloud gaming is going to more or less be the future. And, I was discussing this with a few friends of mine, and I told them, hey, if Sony does not make a change, make some sort of financial investment, they are going to end up lost in the pack, because they do not have the cloud gaming infrastructure needed to move into the future. And here we have it. Sony took the step. They said, hey, Microsoft, you guys have all this stuff that we need. Let's figure out how we can make a partnership, work together to ensure that Google Stadia does not end up basically absolving the console generation and the idea of having a console to play your games. And I think that that's what both of these companies are doing right here by joining forces.
Yeah, and I think this is going to lead, hopefully, to something big in the future. I mean, what would you do if both forces just combined and made one mega console? Whereas, like Xbox and PlayStation backwards compatibility, like that's the dream of all gamers right there, like a 2-in-1 system. I know there's been a lot of like talks about it in the past and, you know, rumors here and there, but I mean, with both of them working on developing future cloud solutions, I don't think it's too off the path to kind of hope and dream for, you know, a combination of the two.
Yeah, I think we can always hope for that, but I gotta believe that we still want the companies to keep things separate just to continue to foster that competition.
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
what drives, you know, it's what drives those companies to continue to bring us some of the best groundbreaking games that we can get on any platform. So I think another big piece of news here for everyone is the news that Robert Pattinson's gonna play Batman. I mean, you're the Batman guy. What's going on, bud?
Well, this is this took me by the surprise, and the thing is, I'm going into it with an open mind. We've seen a lot of actors in the past, you know, follow a similar trend. Heath Ledger, no way he could be the Joker. You know, Michael Keaton, no way he could be Batman. And now we're here with Robert, and you know, I gotta say, I'm pretty optimistic about it. I think, and feel free to quote me on this, I think we're going to get a Batman Beyond. I'm hoping. Because seeing him as Terry, and dude, what would you do? We get Michael Keaton as Old Man Bruce. That would be groundbreaking. Yeah. And I think the setting is perfect for it.
Like I'm feeling what you're saying there, but I'm kind of leaning more towards Batman Year One. And
yeah.
I believe that that's kind of what the rumors were going around for a while there, is that the next Batman movie was going to take place early on in Bruce's heroic career. And this casting decision for me, remember, keep in mind, I'm thinking Batman Year One. I'm like, you know what? That's legit. I think Robert Pattinson is going to be the perfect Bruce Wayne for a Batman Year One storyline. He's a lot younger. He's a lot leaner. He hasn't, you know, fully matured into that super dark, brooding character. It's going to take a few years for that. So I think he's going to. I think this is going to be a good choice for them.
And I can agree with that too. I'm just curious who they're going to cast as Selena, because Catwoman was a pretty big part in Year One too.
Oh yeah, for sure. So that's gonna be pretty exciting, seriously.
So, on other news, it looks like Stan Lee's ex-manager was charged with elderly abuse.
Yeah, this is just sad. You know?
Yeah, Kia Morgan faces 5 counts of abuse against Lee prior to his death last year at the age of 95. It's always something that's traumatic when the elderly is abused, and it just goes to show you it doesn't matter how highly ranked you are in the world standing. You know, Stan Lee was a god among comic fans, and he was still suspect to receiving this type of treatment. So it's an eye-opener. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter your position within the world. Like, you know, it happens to everybody.
Yeah. And you know what's really, really sad is that, like, this is not the first time that this guy has faced charges. Apparently, you know, last year in May and June, there were similar filings placed against him, talking about how he had falsely reported a crime dealing with Stan Lee. And at one point, apparently, he even moved Stan Lee out of his home at midnight so that he could isolate him from his caregivers. It's really, really sad to hear this kind of stuff. To know that, at the end of his days, he unfortunately was not surrounded by people who genuinely cared about him as much as he should have been.
Yeah, it's always a disappointing factor when you get to hear some of the more unhonorable, details, and just how dirty and conniving people can be beneath the mask, beneath their persona of being a good caretaker. It's unfortunate.
Now, this next little tidbit here, I wouldn't say it's necessarily news. It's more of just a little tease. Apparently, Keanu Reeves wants to do Constantine again. And, he's going on talking about John Wick. He's out there on the road, doing his interviews and stuff. And he was on a podcast recently called The Big Ticket, where he basically said, I've always wanted to play John Constantine again. I just love that world. And I love the character. I had a blast playing the character and playing in that world. And I think this is interesting because, there was a show, a Constantine show on NBC that ended up getting canceled. And because of the somewhat cult popularity of that show, they ended up reviving that character, which was played by Matt Ryan. They revived the character on the CW, where he is currently in Legends of Tomorrow. So who knows if maybe the popularity of Constantine is going to eventually get him another movie. But if that is the case, are we going to see Keanu Reeves or are we going to see Matt Ryan?
I really think Keanu Reeves just slayed his role as Constantine. I really enjoyed the Constantine movie. I know there was a lot of negative reviews and a lot of positive and a lot of mixed, but I thought he did very well. I haven't read a lot of the Constantine runs, but from what I've seen Constantine, dabble into, within like the Dark Knight Metals arc and other issues that I have read, I feel like Keanu Reeves really played his part well and effectively. And I think a Constantine 2 would be in the makes, and it would be viable to have him. Like, to me, you don't have Constantine without him in the cinematic universe.
Yeah, it was a good movie. It certainly was. And if they do decide to do it, I'm on board. I am 100% on board. I think our last piece is more of just like a feel-good story, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, an Ohio man donates more than 140,000 comic books, totaling in a whopping $2.5 million of value.
Yeah, this is pretty sweet. And basically, USC ends up with this collection for their library. And what really, really for me makes this a feel good, just a good story all around, is the fact that anyone with a library card is going to be able to walk in there and read one of these books. And this is American literature. This is history. We're talking about, he's got original Avengers comics, and these books need to be on display for future generations to be able to see them before they are lost forever.
Yeah, it's definitely something where a fellow collector just giving his collection for the better use of the public is just astounding. I know I have a pretty large collection myself, and I was thinking about it a lot this morning before we started our podcast, like, how I would feel just giving it up and knowing it's not in my collection. But to be honest, and I think a lot of us can relate to this, you get a run that you've always been wanting for, like whether it was World Breaker Hawk, that was something I was searching for, Flashpoint, Old Man Logan, there's so many, the Blackest Night, like I can go on and on. You read it once or twice, and then you just seal it up in the plastic and you keep it in the box. To be read again, months or years down the road.
Yeah.
I know for me, like some of my comics like have not been out of plastic just because of the rarity, the value, and just how hard it was to find in the wild, and just the fact that this dude gave his 140,000 comics for anyone to be able to open it and read. And like you said, some of these were really old runs. Like the value has to be outstanding on it, and like having them read is going to significantly diminish the value, but like it's not about the value anymore. It's about the literature and the knowledge that comes with the book, and that within itself is just remarkable.
Yeah, certainly. And keep in mind now, what they're saying at USC is that the rarest of the comics will share in an underground safe. So you're going to have comic books sitting alongside medieval manuscripts and even original Hemingway writings. So that's how much some of these books are worth. That they're putting them underground next to some pretty old, pretty influential pieces of writing.
So that wraps up Talk Geekly's take on this week's news. Now, I think me and you and all of our audio listeners have been waiting for our thoughts on Detective Pikachu.
So we did have the release of Detective Pikachu, which, I mean, it's been a long time coming. I know for myself, I have always wanted to see a live action version of the Pokemon universe, and we finally got it, and I gotta say, I enjoyed it. I thoroughly did. I cannot say that it was a bad movie. It might have some flaws, but I liked it. How about you?
Well, let's start off with Detective Pikachu was released May 3rd in Japan and May 10th in the United States. This movie so far has made a whopping $287.4 million at the box office. Let's just hit the audience with that. That's a pretty outstanding number. Now, I've always been a huge Pokemon fan. Pokemon Yellow, excuse me, was the first game I got as a child. I remember working. I had to work for my allowance back then, believe it or not. I remember working for weeks and weeks and weeks to save up for the release of Pokemon Yellow. So when I heard there was a movie coming out with Pikachu as one of the main stars, it definitely piqued my interest, and I watched it a couple times, and I gotta say I really enjoyed it, but I also have to be frankly honest and say there was some plot holes and there was some minor issues I had with the film itself.
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard when you grow up with something and it means so much to you to then see that more or less not a reboot, but see it being brought to life again in a different light. It's always rough to kind of whether or not that thing is going to measure up to your fond memories. But personally, I feel like the movie does have a nice look to it. I mean, the Pokemon really, they're not, I don't want to say they're not scary looking, but there's that uncanny valley that a lot of movies end up falling into when you combine CG and live action. And I feel like this movie does a really good job of blending the two. The Pokemon do really feel like they are part of that world, and the people around them certainly feel like they are interacting with a living, breathing creature. So, I mean, the story, this is where things start to get a little bit wishy-washy. I mean, we talked about this before the podcast, but there's the main character's dad, who happens to be a private investigator, and he dies, or at least that's what we're led to believe. And his Pokemon is Pikachu. So
yeah, we start off with Tim Goodman, who's a 21-year-old insurance salesman who's given up on Pokemon training. The dude was shown to be a huge Pokemon fanatic, with cards and everything. And after the absence of his father, and we later find out, his mother died. He's left all alone, and he's trying to figure out what happened to his dad. So we see him travel to Rhyme City, which is just it's an open metropolis of outlaw Pokemon fighting and just Pokemon galore. And Harry's looking for his father, and that's when we stumble onto Pikachu, who's voiced by none other than Ryan Reynolds, which I really enjoyed Ryan Reynolds' voice acting within this movie. I was really hoping for Danny DeVito. I know,
Which would have been the best.
I know. And when I seen the original petition for it in the beginning happen, I you better believe I signed up for it. But seeing Ryan Reynolds and hearing Ryan Reynolds just be Pikachu in this, I felt that the casting was pretty on point with that as well.
Yeah, but now we want to get back to this interesting plot hole, because I guess it's not a plot hole. It's not really. It doesn't make sense. Here's a guy who is searching for answers to how his dad died, alongside a talking Pikachu that sounds surprisingly familiar, or at least that's what we end up learning towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, this was a point that I brought up to you earlier while we were discussing our thoughts on it. It really doesn't make much sense to me. And given that Harry wasn't in Tim's life a lot, and there was a long period of time where he didn't see his dad, but, we come to find out, like, some really interesting things, which, we're going to talk about in a little bit, but it's just that's like, we start the movie off with one of the biggest plot holes. And even though I really enjoyed the movie, I really enjoyed the concept of it, the visual effects, it's more or less, I guess, my job and our job to like dissect these films and games and comics and really break down to the nitty-gritties parts of them and really bring the eye-openers up.
Yeah, and I mean, let's get back into the basically the plot of this entire thing. You have this large corporation with the evil owner of the company looking to basically find a way to tap into or at least this is what they make it look like. They're trying to find a way to tap into evolution of Pokemon and how you could somehow help humanity with that. And, using Mewtwo's, I don't know, was it his blood? What was the purple? Like, he wasn't like farting out purple gas. Like, somehow they were getting this purple stuff from Mewtwo. Were you able to pick up where or how they were getting that? Because I couldn't.
See, and that's the thing too. I watched it a couple times and I tried to pinpoint it, and it was a little murky for me as well. And whatever this purple gas was, it caused the Pokemon just to go insane. We start out with a party of Ipom, something like that, the purple monkeys. They're just ripping apart the apartment, going after Tim, going after Pikachu. And that was one of my favorite parts too, when Pikachu picks up the knife. I lost it at that part. There was a lot of humorous aspects to this movie that I thought Ryan Reynolds really captured well.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of just good old-fashioned fun times to be had with this movie. I think it just kind of falls into a few too many tropes, especially when it comes to the evil corporation doing shadowy dealings to try to basically take over and do, because, you have that purple gas. You find out, not only does it affect the Pokemon's minds in such a way that it kind of puts them into an uncontrollable rage, but using Mewtwo's powers, you can actually transfer the human mind, the essence of a being, into a Pokemon's body. And this becomes the main the climactic ending where the company has all this gas pouring throughout Rhyme City, and our main villain has somehow been able to capture the body of Mewtwo, and he is now changing everyone from a person to a Pokemon.
Yeah, which that was one of the most offsetting parts of the movie. And correct me if I'm wrong, and feel free, audio listeners, to leave in the comments. I'm not exactly sure of any video game or any animation that has shown Mewtwo to be capable of doing that. I can get the mind control, I can get the mind wiping, I can get almost everything else that Mewtwo was shown to do, because that was actually backed up. But the actually changing humans into Pokemon, was one of the biggest things that just left me hanging.
Yeah, it was a serious stretch. And then let's hit him with it now, Basically, kid's dad didn't die. What happened to his kid? What happened to his dad?
We come to find out that Harry was Pikachu the entire time, and while Harry, aka Pikachu, had his mind wiped, and I can accept that. I can get that. I can get not knowing that you're a Pokemon because Mewtwo wiped your mind. I can't come to terms with the fact that Tim didn't hear his father's voice. And I know I've talked to a couple friends, and they brought up the valid points that, well, maybe he tried to forget, or maybe, he just didn't want to remember. But to me, that's something that's really, it's really hard for me to want to believe, as someone who lost his father when I was 9 years old, and I'm 29 right now, that's 20 years. I can pick my dad's voice out of an audio recording, out of a video. I can hear it clear as day, as if I was hearing it the next day, or the previous day, or what have you. And I have a hard time coming to terms with this dude not being able to pick his dad's voice out of a talking Pokemon. He knew it was kind of weird that he could understand Pikachu. He knew that. He got that. And another big thing was Pikachu was thinking like a Pokemon and understanding how Pokemon works, but was Harry. So how would Harry understand that a Pokemon can understand what a human is saying just by body movement and the way they're talking? Because he makes a point to mention that. That's how Pokemon can understand how humans talk, but how would Harry know that if he was a human? I
think as far as that's concerned, I think because Mewtwo put him inside the body of his Pikachu, there could have possibly been some sort of mind melding, where he still had he was still able to tap into just the original Pikachu's memories and thought processes and things like that. But again, as much as I try to justify that the fact that Tim had no idea that was his dad's voice, it boils down to, it's just, no, you're gonna know that's your dad's voice. Like you said, you should be able to pick up immediately and be like, whoa, why do you sound like my dad right now? But for plot purposes, they had to, they couldn't just give it away that easy.
And I will say this. I will say, all criticism aside, that this is probably one of the best video game to live acting adaptations that I've seen. There's been a lot of attempts at doing a movie to video game. We had Doom, which I wasn't a big fan of, but some people were. Super Mario Brothers. I mean, we had all sorts.
Don't forget that one. That's the best one ever.
And this one just really knocked it out of the park. It had to be really, it had to be really hard to get the Pokemon to look, like they were fleshed out in the world. And, I'm not exactly sure who was acting as Tim Goodman, but he did such a great job.
That's Justice Smith.
Yeah, Justice Smith. He did such a great job because he really interacted with his environment. And, there was just a green screen. There was no actual Pokemon there. And he really, really gave us the feeling and sensation that, he was there right next to Pikachu. So I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, it was a good movie. You know, like we kind of started off this review with that sentiment. You know, it was a good movie. It was fun. It was funny. It just had some minor issues, but I agree with you. All in all, I do agree and feel that this is one of the best, if not the best, video game movie that we've had. And I can't wait to see what happens with Sonic the Hedgehog, to see if it could live up to what Pokemon Detective Pikachu was able to do.
So, Penn, what would you say about this movie to someone who hasn't seen it? What would you give it out of a 10?
For a grade out of 10, I would have to go with a 7.5. But I would stress, you know, it may not be the best score, but I would stress to the person that go to the movie expecting to just have fun. You know, don't expect anything groundbreaking. Just go to the movie to have a good time.
Absolutely. A lot of my friends I talked to said they went into the movie not expecting anything, and it really gave them an awesome experience. And I mean, for myself too, I can say that when I went into the movie, I didn't expect anything but a Pokemon movie. I expected there to be Pokemon, and that was it. And overall, it was a great movie. You know, my daughter loved it. I thought it was good. But once again, it's more or less, I guess, our job to kind of break out these plot holes that we notice and converse about them, because it does bring up some really valid points.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't wait to come back here next week, because we're going to have another awesome episode with who knows what for news, because it's weekly. Things just kind of happen left and right. But are you still thinking about possibly talking about a little Batman versus Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Oh, Palabunga, my dude.
All right, so you have that to look forward to, guys, for next week. We will be discussing Batman versus TMNT, the new DC animated feature that is available right now if you want to go stream it on all those different streaming platforms. But I want to say thank you. What do you want to say, Cody?
Yeah, I appreciate you guys tuning in. I'm so excited to be bringing this to you guys on a weekly basis. It feels right. It feels so much more invigorating to be doing it instead of waiting, bi-weekly. I get really excited to talk about comics, video games, and movies, and it's nice to be able to sit down and, on a consistent schedule and just knocking this out of the ballpark every single week for you guys.
Yeah, so remember, check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, of course, at Talk Geekly. Don't forget, when you are subscribing to the podcast, please give us 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars. And from the two of us here at Talk Geekly, we can't wait to see you next week. Keep it geekly, people.
What's that in the sky? It's a bird. It's a plane. It's Talk